G'day Slinkies, this is Shadia Munro from Slink in Second Life. Welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial we are going to talk about sleeves, in particular shoulders and what you have to do to make nice no clipping shoulders when you're building on a T-pose model. So I've got this shirt pattern here. In real life you can see that the sleeve has a fairly pronounced curve on the top of the pattern. This is the part that sews into the armhole. Let me just grab a pen here. So this is the top of the sleeve. This is the armhole. So this part here sews into this part and this part. When you're creating clothing in 3D, it's a good idea to keep in mind the shape of the clothing as it would be in real life, and try and consider it when you're building your clothing to be something similar so that it will move in a similar way. If we have a look at a real life example that I picked up, you can see here her shoulders when they are down by her sides. I just grab a new layer here. Shoulders when they're down by the sides are nice and smooth, and you can see the shoulder seam there. But when she has her shoulders up in a T-pose, there's quite a lot of wrinkling up here. That is the fabric accommodating for that ease that we saw in the previous slide there, this one here. So when we're building in 3D, we need to keep those aspects of a shirt in mind in order to get sleeves that don't clip on the shoulder. So the easiest way to do that is some minor changes to the way you build your shoulder seams. When you extrude out your sleeve normally, you would take this seam here and extrude it in this direction. And then you end up with a fairly flat line here that and some vertical edges that can result in a very significant clip when you pull the shoulder bone. So you've got a collarbone, you've got an arm bone. When you pull that bone down this way, then you end up with a clip in this area. So the quickest and easiest way to get around this problem is to make some minor adjustments to your mesh once you've extruded your sleeve. And I'll change color back to the red here so that it's easy to see. So all I do is, instead of having a vertical, let me just make this a little smaller. Instead of having a vertical set of rows here, I angle them ever so slightly so that the underarm of that row corresponds with the underarm of the body, and the peak corresponds with the peak of the shoulder, which I've marked here in orange. And then I pull this vertex up a little bit to give it a little bit more room for the shoulder to bend. So this is a little space here that will show up on your mesh when your body is in the T-pose. That doesn't show up when your body is in the normal arms down by your side at right angles sort of pose. So this space here becomes much more minimized when you've got your arms down. This row of edges here appears like this to point towards the peak of the shoulder, which is right there. And then you don't have that little clip and flattening out of the shoulder area. You can always tweak the weighting from this bone and the collarbone that's just here. You can tweak the weighting on this area so that you can make a smooth round shoulder, or you can make a more square shoulder, which is fun to play with. And I've even made stuff that has much more pronounced shoulders. So I've got a suit that I made a few years ago that has a very high peak shoulder like that. And all I did was I changed the angle of this couple of rows and I pulled this vertex upwards so that there's a little bit more space in the shoulder area. It looks like a little peak when you're in T-pose, but when you're in Second Life, how often are you wandering around in T-pose? It really isn't something that you're going to see very often. And it just allows the shoulder a little more space in there in order to be able to move around without clipping through. So now I've got an example that I built in Blender, and I will pop over to that and continue the chat. Okay, so here we are looking at the little video I recorded yesterday, and all I did was I built a very simple shirt starting from a cube, and I'll just talk you through the process of doing this video. Just get my cursor up out of the way. So I first of all import a new cube, and then I, in edit mode, move it across to the left hand side. I don't know why I always build on the left, but I just always build on the left. And then I delete the top and rightmost faces and the bottom face. So I've essentially created a three-sided half a cylinder. And then I add a mirror modifier so that I can see what I'm building with the mirror mode. And the body is symmetrical, so you can build with mirror modifier on, no problem at all. There are some issues towards the end of this build where I need to apply and redo my mirror modifier, but I just turn it off at the end there so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm just fitting the shirt, very basic shirt here. I've extruded up an edge there to create essentially an armhole. And basically I'm just fitting the shirt. So I will stop talking now and fast forward until we get to the interesting bit. So now I've just deleted a face in here to create the actual armhole, and I will use a shrink wrap modifier to deform the mesh, very basic low poly mesh, to the body so that I can keep working on it. So now I've applied the shrink wrap modifier, and I'm just going ahead and smoothing out that mesh that I created with it and continuing to deform it so that it fits over the original body there. And now you can see I'm starting to work on extruding out that sleeve. So I've just gone straight in a T from the actual body. My armhole rows are vertical. As you would think, you create a sleeve in a T-pose. Just adding a couple of rows of extra geometry here and there to make a better deforming sleeve. The other thing you can do when you're having trouble with shoulders clipping is add an extra row of geometry if you're building very low poly like I do. Sometimes I find that just adding one single extra row on the joint can help the deformation out tremendously, just because it has a little more to work with and doesn't need to flatten out those polygons quite as much. So you can see the shirt is fairly low poly, except for the shoulders where I've added that extra row to give it a little more room to move. So I'm making this shirt fairly close fitting so that I can demonstrate the shoulder issue. And now I'm going to attach it to the avastar skeleton using meshes as my target and the physique original body as my target mesh. I can never, ever, ever find the skinning panel. I don't know why, it just eludes me every time. So scroll up and down looking for it. Meshes is the strategy, weight source, physique original, and then bind to armature. and that will do what we want it to do. Now you'll notice that the right arm goes up, and that's just because I need to apply the mirror modifier correctly and change the vertex vertex group names, sorry, and so I just turn the mirror off so that it's not distracting. And here I'm just adding a material and some diffuse color so that we can see what's going on with the shoulder here. And you can see it's flattened out a little bit. It's not too bad, but I'll fix this in a moment with a couple of little tweaks. So we rotate that vertex there that's at the peak of the shoulder, and the next one. And then we move it down, move the bone down, and you can see there's now no more weight problems here, no more clipping here. And that is just simply changing the angle of those two rows. If you want to get even more technical, you can move that vertex up a little bit, but I did no weight painting and no adjusting to this mesh at all, other than changing the angle of those two rows, and the clipping problem is resolved. Of course, you would wear an alpha layer or use an alpha cut. But some clothing doesn't work with alpha cuts in the shoulders, and this is how you would resolve your shoulder issue. You just need to give the shoulder a little bit more room to move. And now I'm just playing with the bones because I always put them into the sort of extreme positions or positions I've seen animators do poses in, and you corkscrew joints and stuff like that. So I like to try out all of the options. And that's it for that video. So I hope this has been helpful, and feel free to ask me in my Discord channel or message me in World at Shadian Munro, and I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to give advice. If you have problems with shoulders, I can probably help you solve it. Thanks for watching.